broadcast. As you know, we've been celebrating this past month the 25th anniversary of Chicago Tonight, and we thank all of you for your support of the gala. And we hope that you have enjoyed the various clips of Chicago Tonight that we've been playing over the past couple of weeks. Now tonight we're going to show you the very first broadcast of Chicago Tonight. That was on April 24th, 1984, and the interview was with then Mayor Harold Washington. And this was appropriate because Chicago Tonight was born of the station's interest in covering the great political revolution of Harold Washington. So here now is the first Chicago Tonight broadcast.
Yesterday, Mayor Harold Washington unveiled stage one of his economic development plan for Chicago. It focused on the revitalization of the neighborhoods and promised to create or save 10,000 jobs. Will the plan deliver what it promises? That story on Chicago Tonight with John Calloway. This evening on Chicago Tonight, Mayor Harold Washington explains his economic plan for Chicago, and he answers your telephone calls at 591-7250. And now your host, John Calloway.
Good evening and welcome to this first broadcast of Chicago Tonight. And Mayor Washington, thank you very much for being our first guest on this broadcast.
Pleasure, Tom.
You go before the City Council tomorrow and you will unveil a series of ordinances which deal with the North Loop development. What's in that package?
It's a very ingenious financial device called tax increment financing, which simply means you take the taxes you would have collected and pour them back into the property help finance to provide equity capital. It's a somewhat ingenious operation. It has gotten the North Loop program out of mothballs and onto the track. We're quite enchanted with it.
What will we see? We're talking about hotels, a shopping center, what?
We're talking about hotels, a shopping center, and all the accoutrements that go with it on that North Loop area. If successful, and we have every reason to believe it will increase the tax base 11 times in that one particular site. It's just a marvelous operation.
How many jobs would go into an area like that?
It's hard to estimate. Most projections are just that. But we would estimate that in the construction area there would be a couple thousand jobs involved. If you track it all out permanently, maybe 3,000 jobs minimally for just that one site there.
All right, now what was the breakthrough on this? Because this thing has been up, it's been down, it's been back, it's been forth. What happened? What was the breakthrough?
Financing. No one could come up with it. UDAG funds, urban development block grant funds weren't sufficient. There was a tax assessment abatement which was tried, but County Assessor Hines said it just wouldn't fly. The citizens were paying too much. It needed some ingenious financing, and Liz Hollander, our planning commissioner, came up with that financing.
Now, this has been done in other cities, is that correct?
Yes, it's been done in other cities. It's not the thing done. It has a certain degree of an orthodoxy about it, but it's sound. It'll get a spirited discussion and debate in the council, but it's a sound package. But it awaited the person who had the genius to just marshal capital in a different way.
Who will be bidding for the hotel space?
Americana has backed out, but there are several people that are in the offing. We're very satisfied that we will get the...
You have at least two principal bidders?
Yes.
And will there be a shopping mall developed across from Marshall Field?
That's correct, that's correct.
And what's the timetable for this?
We want to break ground next year.
What is the timetable on the legislative aspect of it? You introduce the ordinances tomorrow. You need what kind of action by when?
Well, there's a tight timetable. I would assume that in light of the seriousness of it, the council will get right to it. We would hope it would wend its way out of the council inside 30 days. We'll be on track. The time frame, though tight, is not inordinate, so we're very optimistic about it. We think the council will be. There's no question it will work.
All right, so you've got the North Loop back on track, you're saying.
Yes.
Now there's this thing called the South Loop, and there's the public library, and we have reports, and I don't know whether they're true or how timely they are, that you've got a major announcement to make about the public library.
Well, I have no major announcement to make. I have signed on tentatively, or had signed on tentatively to the Goldblatt site. The only reason I hesitated because many people in my Cultural Affairs Committee and Transition team were not totally happy with it. But they concluded, as did I, that we spent so much money into it up front before I came into office, it would be foolhardy to turn around.
You're in how much, $10 million?
At least that. We awaited, of course, the new library board, and those members are now pending in the council, and we felt it was their responsibility to pass on that before it got a final determination. I'm optimistic. I know it's going to happen, but we want the new library board members to deal with it.
You say you know it's going to happen. In other words, we are going to have the Goldblatt's building become a big central library, which will anchor the South Loop.
There's a consensus across the board. That's the thing to do. We're going to go ahead.
All right, now tomorrow you also have a World's Fair piece of business you're going to deal with at the council.
Yes.
What's going to happen there?
We're going to introduce that to the council tomorrow. The intergovernmental contract, which was bruited about quite heavily, and which was the centerpiece to protect the citizens of the city of Chicago from inordinate taxation, service fees, to protect them in terms of displacement, both in terms of residential, commercial, industrial property, to give them some semblance of protection in terms of first shot at these jobs, to make certain that contracting, that comes to Chicago, the construction, the professional, the services, all of these tenuous matters which came from the neighborhoods and which have been thoroughly and vocally expressed by the neighborhood people had to be transmitted into a workable contract. That took time. We would labor that and continue to labor it until we worked it out. Finally, we hammered it out. It's before the council.
So what happens tomorrow?
Well, it'll be submitted to committee. Chairman Stone of the Special Events Committee has indicated his preference for it. He's supportive of it. We're optimistic about it. There's a tremendous pressure for it. We think it's good. There's still a knotty question after it passes of financing it, and that's going to be a knotty question. But the General Assembly will have to deal with that. So we have gone, at this point, through stage 2. The first one was getting the authority, interim financing, now the intergovernmental agreement, and finally the financing, and we hope to wrap that up before the 1st of July.
What's your veto tomorrow?
The veto deals with a line item appropriation to fill a spot which we had vacated pursuant to the Shackman decision. The first deputy of our department was not the man for the job. Clearly a decision-making policy position. We opted to replace him as one of those discretionary jobs that the Shackman decision gave us. The matter was gone to court. We had to give 7-day notice. The judge entered a temporary restraining order, set it down for trial. We lost the trial. We have appealed that case. We think we will win it. In the meantime, the council, by virtue of the judge's decision, restored the pay. We feel this is an executive matter. We know it's an executive matter. The council did it, notwithstanding my wishes that it not be done. We're going to veto it, and veto it with gusto, and send it back to the council. And also, we support the Shackman decision, half from front up. We are opposed to patronage.
But you want some leeway to make your appointments for the executive part of this
You've got to have
government.
some Lebensraum. You've got to bring on your team, or you cannot be accountable. And one of the main disappointments of this administration at this point has been the slowness by which Judge Boer has resolved those matters. We have not been able to bring our people on. Now, we're not firing people across the board, but we insist that we must have our team in place so they can be accountable. We do not want sabotage to continue. We don't want slovenly work. We want expert work with people.
Are you getting sabotage?
To a limited extent, we are. It's clear. We have
What forms does sabotage take from people that you can't get out, that you want to get out?
It takes all forms of sabotage, all forms. For example, we come in with a program which needs a certain amount of quietness and confidentiality in its initial stages so that we can resolve the matter. Oftentimes, this is leaked prematurely, and it creates some serious problems, political and otherwise. Other times, there's certain individuals who simply not producing, deliberately not producing. We know who they are. We're not after good employees. We have retained and promoted many employees whom we inherited, but there are certain people who simply cannot function under the vigorous kind of administration that this city needs and which I was elected to provide for them.
Mr. Mayor, one of the other concerns of this city, as you know, is race relations, and recently, during your State of the City address, you talked about that problem, and here is a clip that we want to show from that speech.
We shouldn't be confused